Shalom and welcome to the Heartland Connection. This is Zach Waller, the Executive Director of Hayuvel, your host. I have to tell you guys that I usually record my podcast early in the week, and so some of you guys might have been surprised that I didn't include anything about President Trump's announcement in last week's podcast, but it's because I recorded the podcast before the announcement was made. So I am super excited about the announcement, and we actually had a little party here after the announcement was made. I don't know. I just, I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of politicians and stuff like that. So I was honestly, maybe I was a lack of faith. I'm not sure, but I was not expecting it to come out the way it did, that President Trump would actually declare that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and that he's working towards moving the embassy there. You know, I don't know. Like I said, maybe it was just a lack of faith, but I just did not see it coming and coming across so strong, and he just nailed it. Like, this is just the reality, and I'm just, acknowledging the reality of the situation, and, just laid it out there. So I was super excited about that. This is a really big deal. And something that's incredible, that the President of the United States would line himself up with God's will and make a declaration like that is just amazing. So we have been rejoicing around here, and I hope you have too. If you haven't heard about all these things going on, which I don't know how you might have missed it, but because it's been all over the news and everywhere. But if you did, go up and look it up and check out what all happened. And if you haven't watched the actual announcement itself, I encourage you to go and do that. You can find it online. I was reading some of the articles and things that were put out afterwards, and I read one by Carolyn Glick. If you're not reading Carolyn Glick's articles, she is like one of the best writers. Is information coming out of Israel. You have to, sign up for her emails. Especially if you're a reader and you like reading the news from Israel, which should be all of us that are pro-Israel. We need to be connected to what's happening there. Her list is a really, really good one to get on. She's just a really, really awesome writer, and she is very knowledgeable about history and current, things going on in the land of Israel. So I'd strongly encourage you to go and check her website and check it out and get on her email list. But at the end of her article, she says, to sum it up then, by recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and this article is called Trump's Great Gifts to Israel and America. So she continues, Trump made clear that U.S. support for Israel is not conditioned on anything. Israel, the Jewish state, is supported by the U.S. because it deserves U.S. support as an allied democracy. She goes on to say, Trump strengthened himself against his political opponents by taking ownership of a deeply popular foreign policy position. There's a lot of people that are very much for Jerusalem being recognized as the capital, and so he was just going along with that. The article continues, he took control of U.S. foreign policy from a State Department that opposes his policy. In an article, she explains how he basically got the control back from the State Department. He made reality, rather than the defiance of reality, the foundation of U.S. Middle East policy. So again, just acknowledging the reality of what's going on. She says he put U.S. allies and enemies on notice that he is calling the shots in U.S. foreign policy, and he took a large step towards restoring U.S. credibility as a superpower. Oh, and he accomplished all of these things without spending a dime. For his gift to Israel, Trump now enters the pantheon of Israel's friends in the annals of Jewish history. For his gift to America, he has taken his place among the most astute American statesmen. And for his political and economic mastery, he enters the ranks of the geniuses of American political history. So I think that's a pretty good summary of the whole thing. And I would encourage you guys to go and look up these articles and read more about it. So a little update from what's going on with Hayuvel. We have begun our Hebrew course for wrapping up 2017 and going into 2018. Ended up with about 70 students here, so we're super excited, and things are moving along well. All the teachers are up and running, and things are going well here. It's, again, such an incredible thing to be a part of the restoration of Israel, and the whole rebirth of the language is a huge part of that. So huge blessing to just be a part of these restorative things that God's doing. So, jumping into the Torah portion, we're in Mekeitz, which is Genesis chapter 41, verse 1, through chapter 44, verse 17. And one interesting thing I was reading about as I was looking through the commentaries is that in chapter 41, verse 1, it says, "Behold, he stood over the river." And so this commentary was saying that the wicked see themselves as standing over their gods, because the Nile is like the god of Egypt, right? It was like their source of, of life that they acknowledged or whatever. It was their arch deity, So the commentator was saying that the wicked see themselves as standing over their gods. As it says, Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood over the river. But as for the righteous, their God stands over them, as it says regarding Jacob's dream. Behold, God stood over him in Genesis chapter 28 when it talks about the ladder going up and down. So this is an interesting comparison to the way Pharaoh saw his God and the way we should see our God, the God of Israel. So I thought that was an interesting little thing. I also want to point out that this whole story of Joseph, there's so much here that is pointing towards, messianic pictures in the story of Joseph. And so, but I just felt like that there are probably a lot of teachers in the messianic world, whatever, teaching about these things. So I'd encourage you guys to go and look up those things. There's a lot of really awesome teachings out there. And again, my main objective in this podcast is to kind of pull in some Jewish thoughts. So obviously, who the Messiah is one thing that us and the Jewish people differ on. So I'm going to go a little bit different direction. What I would like to actually talk about is dreams. Now, this is kind of an interesting topic. It's something that I've put some thought into. I never have been somebody who put a whole lot of thought and investment in dreams. But I have had a few dreams that I feel like, definitely meant something, that you just have this feeling afterwards, whoa, that dream was significant. And there was something about that dream that was just different. And obviously these portions, last week's portion, the portion began and ended with two dreams. The beginning of the portion, we had Joseph's two dreams, the one about all his brothers bowing down in the sheaves, and then another one about the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down. And then it ended with the dreams of the chief baker and the chief butler. And then this portion starts off with this dream that Pharaoh has. And so I just want to kind of dig into this a little bit about this whole dream thing, and maybe pull in some of what, some Jewish perspective that I've picked up from the Jewish people and from doing a little bit of studying here. The one guy I was listening to from Chabad, the Chabad website, he was talking and threw out some really interesting information. He said that on average, us as human beings, we spend about 25 years of our life sleeping. So there's some reason why God created us where we actually need sleep. Everything that God has created is for a reason. And so it's just kind of fascinating to say, okay, so 25 years of my life, for an average person, is going to be spent actually sleeping. And so they say that on average of about 6 years, you actually spend dreaming. So 6 years of my life are going to be spent in dreaming dreams. And this teacher that I was listening to, he talked about how there's a lot of thoughts about dreams and if they really mean anything. And there was one guy he was talking about who went around and did a kind of survey on which kind of dreams people were having. And so it was kind of interesting because a lot of people all over the world were actually have the same kind of dreams. And you probably relate to this as I go through these real quick. But some of the most common were one, that somebody's being chased, or that somebody was falling or drowning, or that somebody was flying, or that you walk into somewhere only partly dressed, or another really popular one was if you're in an out-of-control vehicle or some sort of, whatever kind of vehicle. And another one was being lost or trapped. And he said these are really common. As this guy went around and did the study, he found a lot of people had these dreams. And so they say, people have studied this or whatever. They say that sometimes if a lot of times if people are having these dreams about falling or drowning, then it could mean that they're going through something in life to where they feel overwhelmed, and then this is coming out in their dream. Or if you're being chased, it could mean that you're being threatened by someone or something. that dream where you're like trying to run and you're like going so slow and the thing's catching up behind you, that kind of dream. They said if you have a dream that you're flying, it could mean that you just experienced something where you were just super uplifted, maybe spiritually, or just sort of a carefree and just some sort of freedom that you felt, and so now you're having a dream about flying. The partly dressed one, they said, was maybe you were emotionally overexposed, that you said too much or something like that, and you felt like you maybe let out more than you were really wanting to. So you might have a dream like that. The out of control vehicle, they said, if you're feeling like things are kind of spinning out of control in your life or whatever, if you don't feel like you have a good grasp on what you really want or what's going on in your life, then maybe you'll have a dream about a vehicle going out of control. And then if you miss an opportunity to do something, they say that's when you have a dream about being trapped, or maybe they said even forgetting your identification or something like that. So this one thought about dreams is that you are just having a dream about something that you felt, that you experienced, and then you're having a dream that kind of relates to that. And a kind of more Jewish thought, they say that when you go to sleep, that your physical body kind of is resting, but that your spirit rises to spiritual heights. And they say that during this their sleep, that you actually, there's like a certain percentage of death that you actually experience, because you're like totally kind of shut down in a way. They said it's 1/60th. You're experiencing 1/60th of death, and they said you're also experiencing 1/60th of prophecy. And so that's when prophetic things can come in. And so there's a little bit of Jewish perspective on what happens when you go to sleep. So basically we're saying you could have a dream because of, external factors, something that you experienced. Is maybe it's even because it was like hot in the room, or because you banged your toe on something and so you're having a dream. Like it could be something that you're experiencing externally. It could be prophetic. So it could be an angel or God speaking to you. And it's interesting that the Hebrew word chalom is actually related to the word for strengthen. And so, there's a thought that a dream could be something that is intended to strengthen you, to bring courage to you, to bring strength. It's really interesting. And right now, as we're reading through the book of Genesis, that the root letters for chalom, dream, is chet, lamed, mem. Okay? Those three letters are the root, and those root letters together, to make a word, occur 48 times in the book of Genesis, and so they're occurring a lot. They only occur 7 times in the whole rest of the Torah. Okay, so 48 times this some form of this word chalom appears in the Bible, 48 times, and 7 times in the whole rest of the Torah. So it kind of gives a little bit of an idea of what Genesis is and what it's speaking to us. It's laying the ground. It's like this dream, and according to some Jewish writings, they actually say that there was a total of 48 prophets. So it's kind of like this prophetic thing in the dream is coming out in the book of Genesis, like this prophecy, which would go along with the whole thought that God works in cycles and that what He did before will happen again, and this whole idea. It's also kind of interesting thought, and that this one teacher that I was listening to said that, and pointed out that as we read through the Torah portions, it's interesting that we're reading this portion that's like hugely focusing in on dreams during the time of year when we have the most time to dream, right? This time of the year, the hours of daylight are less, the hours of night are more, and so we're actually reading this portion about dreams while there's a lot of opportunity to do the dreaming. One Jewish thought about dreams is that dreams follow the interpretation. So we see in this, and it's actually taken from this portion, where where I think it's I didn't write down the exact reference, but where somebody's telling, I think it may be one of the was it Joseph to Pharaoh or something like that, but they say that it followed as was interpreted. Okay, so there's one thought that, okay, so Joseph interpreted it and it came to pass according to what he said, so he must be a true, he must be capable of interpreting dreams. But then another thought is that the dream went according to the interpretation. So some Jewish thought is that if somebody has a dream, then you don't want to go to your enemy or somebody who's not, on your good side at that point, because they may interpret the dream wrong, and it might actually come to pass because the dream will follow the interpretation. That you should go to somebody who will interpret it well. As they say, the actual the true interpretation won't actually come to pass unless it's interpreted, and so it's important to have your dreams interpreted, to talk about them and to interpret them correctly so that they will actually happen. So this is a little interesting thing about the way Jewish people see the dreams. So basically, it's according to what the interpreter said. There was even stories about how somebody had their dream interpreted 24 different ways, and they all came to pass because the interpretation follows the dream. So it is interesting. And then, sometimes you have a dream, and then you just feel kind of unclean or something after. You just have this just troubling, kind of like, we have Pharaoh in this thing. He has this dream, and he's just troubled by it. It's not like an ordinary dream. There's something different about this one. It's troubling. It's like stirring up something within me that just feels like this dream was more than just a regular dream. And so the Jewish people acknowledge that this happens, and actually in some of the older Siddurim, the prayer books, they actually have a specific prayer that you're supposed to pray when you have a bad dream, and they say that it's basically in order to bring a good interpretation and to help you not to be worried that something bad could happen, because, as I just mentioned, they believe that when you interpret a dream in a good way, then that's what will come to pass. And so they had this prayer in the Siddur to pray to God and ask him to basically annul anything bad and cause something good to come from the dream. And the Jewish people definitely acknowledge that there are, just natural dreams, things that occur, that you dream about because of what you experience or whatever, and they're not really relevant, and they don't really, it's not prophetic in any way. and I think most Jewish people today would agree that most we have in today's world are natural. And one of the reasons why they would say that is because in today's world we have a lot more stimulations, a lot more things that would cause us to dream. We're in a world, I was just, my wife and I went out to eat the other day. We went to this little pizza restaurant, and there was like 3 TVs going in the room, and there's like this loud music playing behind, and there's these flashing lights over by the where you pay and everything, by the cash register. And it just occurred to me, like, man, we're out in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, and there's like all this, serious stimulation going on. And I was like, wow, this is really kind of interesting. And so, we have these things in today's world that are like super stimulating, and we have, we're so much more connected and talking to different people, and, we're FaceTiming and texting, and, in the old days, and really not that long ago, you might not actually have so much interaction, so much stimulation. Even movies and videos are super stimulating. And so that's one thought, that it could create more just natural dreams and not necessarily spiritual or prophetic ones. So one thing that's really interesting and question that one of the teachers I was reading from brought up, he said, okay, so why did God make us a creature that sleeps? How come he created us to need sleep? I mean, he could have created us where we didn't need that, right? And so this teacher brought up, he said, have you ever had a day where things just didn't go quite right? It seems like one thing after the other just wasn't happening the way that you would really like it to, and you just really wanted that day to end. You wanted it to just start over and have a clean slate, right? Well, just imagine if that day never ended, if it just continued on forever and ever and ever. And the reality is we need refreshing. We need a new day. We need to go to sleep and wake up to a whole new, brand new world. And, what a gift it is that we are able to, even the scripture talks about, his mercies are new every morning. Every morning we wake up, his mercies are new. We're able to enter into a new day, and with a clean slate, with having been forgiven, washed clean of anything that might have, gone wrong the day before. After we've repented and confessed, we've gone to sleep, woke up, and now we're fresh for a new day. So I thought that was pretty powerful, and just a recognition of what sleep is for. And also, if sleep is given to us for this reason of like being refreshed and giving us a clean slate, that it's not surprising that God would use that to speak to us, to give us, to help us enter into a new day, to help us get to a new and better place. There's a lot of scriptures that actually talk about dreams, and I was really fascinated as I was studying through that it was specifically connected to prophets, like not just here and there or randomly, but it was actually very strongly connected to whenever the Bible would talk about prophets and prophecy, would talk about dreams. So it seems like dreams was a very common way for the prophets of the Bible to get messages from God. Numbers chapter 12, verse 6, talking about Moses, and it says, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward, and he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses, with Moshe. He is faithful in all my house. So we see God saying here, most of the time I speak to prophets through visions and dreams, but with Moses I speak face to face. We have the passage in Deuteronomy that talks about a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, it says. In Jeremiah 29, verse 8, it says, for thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, and do not listen to the dreams that they dream. And then in the New Testament, we even have Joseph, and being told in a dream. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 20, it says, but as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. So really, I don't know if I've ever really put that all together, that like these dreams are like a prophetic word coming to Joseph. I just thought, it was just a warning that God told him, but Joseph could rely on this because he knew that dreams were prophetic, that he could pay attention to this. Some interesting things I was reading about regarding fasting said if you had a bad dream and something that really bothered you, then it was appropriate to fast and pray that anything that was negative that was supposed to come against you would be turned. And I've heard that a lot in Christian circles too. A lot of people will say that you might have a warning dream. So basically you're having a dream about something that might come to pass, so you need to pray and seek God and seek him for how to heed this warning and then follow his plan to avoid whatever bad thing that might happen. So that was really interesting. Another interesting point is that Pharaoh's dream in this week's Torah portion is doubled, right? And then what does Joseph say about that? He says in verse 32, it says, the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God and God will shortly bring it about. But then we see Joseph actually had a double dream, the last week's portion, but it didn't really shortly come to pass. So the idea is that maybe it had a different meaning, and that Joseph's dream, we see that the one dream was about straw and bundling up these sheaves, and the other one was about planets and the stars and the heavenlies. And so one thought is that Joseph's dream, it was doubled because it was showing him two different pictures and basically showing how the things of this earth, the physical things and the heavenly things, spiritual things, need to be connected. And in a way, that's kind of, in some ways, what dreams are. When you have a prophetic dream, it's like bringing a heavenly thing, a prophetic thing into the earth, right? And sometimes it's difficult for us to put these things together, we're so into our work, the physical, and then suddenly, we start having relational issues and we realize, oh, wait a second, I need to get back in spiritual health, make sure that I'm praying and reading the word and doing these things so that I don't get so just stuck into the physical, but recognize the spiritual. And then, maybe we have a different person who likes to talk a lot, maybe even pray a lot and seem very spiritual, but their actions are far from righteous. Like the physical things that are done aren't, lining up with their spirituality. And so we have to make sure that we have a balance and we're following God wholeheartedly in the spiritual and the physical and bringing these things together. So thank you guys so much for listening. Shabbat Shalom and Chanukah Sameach. Restoration.